About this because now when you're an independent now.
Yeah.
So what does that say? That to me it says that you think the Republican Party is unsavable.
Unsavable. Oh, no doubt about it.
Because otherwise you would want to stay on, right, and reform it, but you think
it can't be saved.
It cannot be saved. I argued with that. I've never argued that of a false equivalency. I just said there is misinformation from both.
Things between Bill Maher and MSNBC's Joe Scarborough just took a wild turn. Their late-night face-off had Scarborough backing out of the conversation like he was trying to moonwalk off set. Maher, never one to bite his tongue, ripped into Scarborough's sketchy take on Trump, tearing it apart like stale cheese. The aftermath? Joe looked like he had somewhere very important to be. Anywhere but there. So what exactly did Scarborough say that set Maher off? And how did Maher clap back? Stick around. This tea's coming in hot and freshly brewed.
Donald Trump said that he was going to use the military and the National Guard to arrest his political opponents. He was asked if he would back off of that.
He said no.
And he said no. In fact, he doubled down. He talked about Nancy Pelosi being evil, her husband being evil, Schiff being evil, talking about arresting them. He said he was going to execute the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff because he was disloyal to him. He told another chief of staff who was a general, I wish.
It's just another day, and the Trump derangement syndrome is alive and kicking. Some folks still can't seem to wrap their heads around the reality of his presidency. They'll go to incredible lengths to spin his words, spark fear, and distort facts just to cast him as the villain. As usual, Bill Maher's reaction is exactly what you'd expect. But before we get into that, let's talk about Joe Scarborough's completely biased take on Trump's latest statements. This is a textbook case of narrative manipulation. What really jumps out is how Scarborough conveniently skips over the context behind Trump's words. Or worse, flat out ignores the reasons he may have said what he did in the first place. Leaving out those key details isn't just misleading, it's intentional. It's a calculated move to create a darker, one-sided version of the story. This kind of selective editing doesn't happen by accident. It's designed to twist the truth and keep the outrage engine running at full throttle. In the end, it's all about keeping the Trump hate train rolling and making sure every conversation about him stays drenched in distortion.
Lived through COVID. Don't tell me there wasn't misinformation.
There's a difference between...
I lived through stupid policies based on bad information and stifled information.
But it can't matter.
That's what Zuckerberg said. He said they were forcing us not to.
Here's the irony that's hard to ignore. Everything the left accuses Trump of, they're often guilty of themselves. It's like a masterclass in projection. As Ma brilliantly pointed out, they're just as responsible, if not more so, for spreading misinformation, especially through networks like MSNBC. Need examples? Take your pick. The Russian collusion narrative pushed relentlessly by Rachel Maddow. The dismissal of the Hunter Biden laptop story as disinformation. The endlessly repeated, find people on both sides hoax. Time and time again, MSNBC has been caught pushing false or misleading narratives. But the real kicker? It's their blatant refusal to acknowledge their own missteps, while amplifying every little thing Trump says or does. Every word out of Trump's mouth is scrutinized, twisted, and weaponized. But when a left-wing figure makes an obviously false claim, it's either ignored, brushed off, or spun as a harmless mistake. This isn't just hypocrisy, it's a calculated tactic. It's about controlling the story, keeping their viewers locked into a state of fear, outrage, and moral superiority, and making sure Trump remains the designated villain. Because if they ever admitted to their own misinformation, they'd have to face an uncomfortable truth. They're no different than the man they've spent years demonizing, and that's something they can't afford to let the public realize.
You haven't changed, so you consider yourself a liberal, right?
I consider myself an old school liberal. You have to make that distinction now because, you know, the word woke, which started out as a good thing, being alert to injustice, and a lot of people get triggered by the word because when they hear it, they think of it the old meaning, which was good.
Right.
You know, stay woke. But I'm sorry, language is a living, breathing entity. Words change and they migrate and they take on a different meaning. And woke now has to answer for, or for people have just used the word to ascribe a number of extreme things on the.
Now here's where I've got to push back on Ma, because he makes it seem like only a small part of the left has gone overboard with wokeness. But let's be honest, that's just not the reality anymore. This isn't some fringe group shouting into the void. Wokeness has gone mainstream. It's the dominant culture now across liberal circles. From politicians to media power players to Hollywood insiders, this isn't just a phase. It's the actual playbook they're running with. And Scarborough? Not surprisingly, he didn't have much to say in response. Probably because deep down, he knows Ma isn't wrong. The real question is, how long can he keep pretending he doesn't see it?
Kamala's big, I think, challenge here to win over the undecided voters is to convince them that she's not part of what they suspect she might be, sort of a stealth version of the worst excesses of the left. I said there's a coalition of Trump voters, people who really like him. They certainly are those. And then there's people who don't necessarily like him that much, but they still think he's less crazy than stuff that strikes them as aggressively anti-common sense.
Right.
That takes place on the left.
Right.
So that's why they keep running that ad about sex changes in prison. You know, like
and every football game.
Could you get every foot? That's
Exactly. Kamala Harris couldn't distance herself from the woke left even if she tried. Why? Because let's be real, she's not hanging around the edges of the movement. She's deep in the middle of it. This isn't some underground fringe faction trying to claw its way into the spotlight. Wokeness is the left now. It's mainstream, it's the establishment, it's the loudest voice in the room. Just look at the support Harris pulled in. Her rallies weren't filled with moderate Democrats pushing back against the woke agenda. They were packed with people cheering it on. She had Hollywood's biggest stars fawning over her, reporters lobbing her the easiest questions imaginable, and media outlets conveniently ignoring anything that didn't fit the narrative. That's not the work of some fringe radical group. That's the Democratic machine, fully activated and firing on all cylinders. So let's stop pretending wokeness is some small side trend. It's not the exception anymore, it's the rule.
have to, on the one hand, understand you benefited from racism if you're white. There's no doubt about it. And that has to be addressed. It can't be ignored.
Right.
But also, I didn't personally do it. There's a middle ground there. It's very difficult.
Two things can be true at one time.
And they are both true at one time.
Right.
I'm not personally responsible, but did I benefit? Yes, I'm sure I did. People our age definitely did.
Right.
And so, if we can all agree on things like that, we could then come up with sensible...
I've got to side with Ma on this one. If we really want to heal the deep ideological divide tearing this country apart, we've got to return to something we've lost: balance. Our government needs to focus on real solutions to real problems, without constantly pandering to one side or shutting out the other. That means leaving behind performative politics and getting serious about policies that actually work, not just for the loudest voices, but for everyone. Take racism, for example. It's a deep, complex issue that demands a smart, thoughtful, step-by-step approach. It can't be fixed with sweeping, surface-level policies that are more about image than impact, but that's exactly what we've been getting. Programs like DEI may have started with good intentions to level the playing field for minorities, but in reality, they've created a wave of unintended consequences. Lives disrupted, jobs lost, even public safety put at risk. When ideology overrides practicality, everyone ends up paying the price. If we don't steer this country back toward results-driven, rational leadership, this divide is only going to keep getting worse.
Sometimes on the left, they don't want to acknowledge progress because it interferes with virtue signaling.
Right.
To say, we've come a long way, which we have.
It's okay to say that.
It's okay to say it's okay. But somehow you're a better person if you say, but there's work to be done. Of course there's work to be done. There's always work to be done. We're humans. We're on Earth. There's always going to be work to be done. But let's be realistic about where we are.
Bill Maher hits on a powerful irony here. The very people who claim to lead the charge for progress on the left often seem the most unwilling to admit just how far we've come. Yes, racism is still a serious issue, and we're not done fighting it. But let's be honest, we're not living in the Jim Crow era anymore. To act like we haven't moved forward is not just misleading, it's downright dishonest. It's okay to acknowledge progress. In fact, it's necessary. But here's the twist: the left won't do it. Because for some, keeping the narrative of constant victimhood alive isn't just ideology, it's business. Race hustlers, people who make a living off division, thrive in a climate of grievance. Just look at Whoopi Goldberg, Sunny Hostin, Don Lemon, names that come up time and again. The more outrage they fuel, the more attention and influence they gain. And if we start celebrating real advancements, that spotlight dims, that influence fades. So while the country continues to move forward, some of these voices have a vested interest in pretending we're stuck in the past. For them, this isn't about justice anymore. It's about keeping the outrage machine running, because that's where the profit is.
Seen focus groups over the past couple of days of Trump voters who still would support him, who say things like, I like Donald Trump because of where he stands. I can't even say with a straight face on the issues. Now you tell me, what the does that mean? What does he, what issues? What issues does this guy share with conservatives?
Since you're acting like you don't understand what resonates with conservatives about Donald Trump, let me spell it out for you. Trump has consistently stood up for core conservative values, like the belief that there are only two genders and the protection of women's sports from biological males. He's drawn a firm line when it comes to men and women's restrooms, and has backed parental consent laws to safeguard kids from irreversible gender transitions. But it's not just about culture wars. Trump has also taken bold steps to secure our country. Under Biden and Harris, our borders have become alarmingly wide open, fueling spikes in crime and unchecked illegal immigration. Trump's working to bring back law and order by deporting violent offenders and closing dangerous loopholes that put national security at risk. He's also going after broken, corrupt institutions, recovering taxpayer dollars lost to fraud and waste in agencies like USAID. His push for transparency and fiscal responsibility is a sharp contrast to the reckless spending and failed policies we're seeing from the current administration. Trump's record is packed with action and accountability. But let's be honest, you probably won't admit to any of it. Your refusal to even acknowledge the facts about what he's actually done says more about your bias than anything else. When facts don't fit the narrative, you just ignore them.
About this, because now when you're an independent now.
Yeah.
So what does that say? That to me it says that you think the Republican Party is unsavable.
Unsavable. Oh, no doubt about it.
Because otherwise you would want to stay on, right, and reform it, but you think
it can't be saved.
It cannot be saved.
Well, one thing's for sure. Under Donald Trump's leadership, the Republican Party just made a massive comeback. And not just any comeback, they took the seat back in style. Something none of those so-called electable Republicans have pulled off in over 20 years. This wasn't a win. It was a wipeout. A total domination that sent a crystal clear message. The MAGA movement isn't just alive, it's surging. This landslide victory slammed the door on weak leadership, broken policies, and the out-of-touch elites who thought they could silence everyday Americans. But here's the thing, they fought back. They saw through the lies, the corruption, and the empty promises. And they responded with their votes. So Joe, you might want to start getting used to the idea of Trump being back. Because this isn't just another election cycle, it's a full-blown reckoning. The silent majority? Yeah, they're not so silent anymore. And they just delivered a brutal dose of reality to you and your party. The America First agenda isn't going anywhere. If you thought the last 4 years were tough, just wait. Buckle up, because what's coming next is about to shake up the system like never before. And with that, we'll wrap up today's video. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you in the next one.